Hello and welcome to Grace Tutorial. In this video lecture, we will be discussing about the salient features of the Indian Constitution. Well, you see, the Constitution of India is unique in its spirit as well as the content. Though the Indian Constitution has borrowed most of its features from the other constitutions of the world, it has some several features that distinguish it from the other constitutions of the world. So let us discuss each and every feature very broadly. The first one we have, that is the lengthiest written constitution. Well, you see, the constitution is basically of two types. One is the written constitution. Yes, the constitution is basically of two types. One is the written constitution, that is, for example, the American Constitution, and another, the unwritten constitution, for example, the Britain Constitution. So what about the Indian Constitution? The Indian Constitution is also an elaborate written constitution. But you need to remember here, the Indian Constitution is the lengthiest written constitutions of the world, because it contains a very comprehensive, elaborate and a detailed document. The Constitution was adopted on November 26, 1949. The Constitution of India was adopted on November 26, 1949, and it contained a preamble, and it had initially 395 articles divided into 22 parts and 8 schedules. Initially it had 395 articles which is divided into 22 parts and 8 schedules. But currently, if you look at, we have more than 444 articles, hundreds of amendments which is divided into 25 parts, and we have 12 schedules. So what are the reasons behind the bulkiest nature of the Indian Constitution? What are the factors that have contributed to the elephantine size of the Indian Constitution? Well, let us discuss the factors one by one. The first one we have is due to the geographical factor. The geographical factor, the India is a very vast country along with its diversity, and this is also one of the most important factor which tells you about the bulkiest nature of the Indian Constitution. The second factor we have is the historical importance. So what is about this historical importance? The historical importance say that most of the features of the Indian Constitution are from the Government of the India Act, Government of India Act of 1935. That means the influence of the Indian Constitution is mostly from the Government of the India Act of 1935. And one more, that is the Constitution. Well, basically, the Constitution, there is only one constitution for the entire nation, but there is no any separate constitution for the states. So these are the three most important factors which contribute to the elephantine size of the Indian Constitution, or which contributes to the bulkiest nature of the Indian Constitution. That's why we say that the Indian Constitution is the lengthiest written constitutions in the world, because it contains more than 444 articles, hundreds of amendments, 12 schedules, which is divided into 25 parts. Move on to the feature number 2, that is drawn from various sources. Well, you see, most of the provisions of the Indian Constitution are drawn from, or most of the features of the Indian Constitution have been borrowed from almost other countries of the world. as well as the Government of the India Act of 1935. Let us look at one by one. Basically, the structural part of the Indian Constitution, which is to a large extent is derived from the Government of the India Act of 1935. And the philosophical part, that is the fundamental rights as well as the directive principles of the state policy, are derived largely from the American Constitution as well as the Irish Constitution. That means the fundamental rights are derived from the American Constitution and the directive principles of the state policy are derived from the Irish Constitution. So what about the political part of the Indian Constitution? The political part of the Indian Constitution is derived from the British Constitution. That is the principles of the cabinet and the nature of relation between the legislature as well as the executive organs of the government. And this political part structure has been derived from the British Constitution. And in this way, the various other provisions of the Constitution have been derived from almost every countries of the world, including the Germany or Australia, USSR, which is now Russia. In this way, the various countries from where the Indian Constitution has borrowed its various features. So that is all about the drawn from the various sources. Next, we have the blend of rigidity as well as the flexibility. So what is about the blend of rigidity as well as the flexibility? Well, the constitution is basically of two types, which is a rigid constitution. So what do you mean by rigid constitution? A rigid constitution is that constitution which requires a special procedure for its amendment. On the other hand, a flexible constitution is that constitution that can be amended in the same manner as the ordinary laws are made. Let me give you a brief understanding on the blend of rigidity as well as the flexibility, because the Indian Constitution is not rigid as well as it is not flexible, but is a synthesis of both. It is neither rigid nor flexible, but a synthesis of both. So what is all about the blend of rigidity as well as the flexibility? Article 368, which is mentioned in Part 20 of the Indian Constitution, it gives the power. It deals with the power of the Parliament, in order to amend the Constitution of India, in order to exercise its constituent powers. That means the Parliament can amend the Constitution, the features of the Constitution, according to the Article 368 of the Indian Constitution. However, the Parliament cannot amend those parts of the Indian Constitution, those features of the Indian Constitution which form the basic structure of the Constitution. So which are the factors, what are the features come under the basic structure of the Indian Constitution? Well, the supremacy of the Constitution, the sovereignty and the republican nature of the Indian polity, the unity and integrity of the nation, the judicial review, free and fair elections, independent judiciary, the balance, the harmony and the main balance between the fundamental rights as well as the directive principles of the state policy. These are the features which come under the basic structure of the Indian Constitution. So what does the Article 368 says? Article 368 says that the Parliament has the power to amend the Constitution, but the Parliament cannot amend those provisions of the Constitution which form the basic structure of the Indian Constitution. And this was ruled by the Supreme Court in the case of Nanda Bharti case in 1973. You need to remember this fact as well, as my dear students. So according to this article, what are the different ways that the provision can be amended? So we have the three different ways in which the provision can be amended. Number one, the simple majority. So what do you mean by this simple majority? There are some certain provisions of the Indian Constitution which can be amended by the simple majority of both the houses of the Indian Parliament. So what are the provisions which come under this simple majority? What are such certain features which can be amended by the simple majority of both the houses of the Indian Parliament? The features such as, the establishment of the new states or the formation of the new states or the alteration of the areas, boundaries or the names of the existing states, as well as the emoluments, allowances, privileges of the president, the governor, the speakers, the judges, the salaries of the members of the parliament. So these are the provisions that can be amended by the simple majority of the parliament. And the next way, we have the special majority. There are some certain provisions of the Indian Constitution which can be amended by the special majority of the parliament. That is, by the 50%, more than 50% of the total membership of each house of the parliament, and the two-thirds of each house of the parliament present and voting. That is the special majority. That means, so what are the certain provisions? Which are those provisions that can be amended by the special majority of the parliament? Well, the fundamental rights as well as the directive principles of the state policies, etc. These are the features which can be amended by the special majority of the parliament. Well, we have one more, that is the special majority of the parliament along with the approval of the state legislature. That means the consent of the state legislature. There are some other features of the Indian Constitution, my dear students, which can be amended not only by the special majority of the parliament but also with the ratification of the one half of the state legislature. That means without the consent of the state legislature, those provisions cannot be amended. So what are the features, what are such certain provisions which can be amended by the special majority of the parliament along with the consent of the state legislature? There are some features like the elections of the president as well as its manner, the Supreme Court as well as the High Court, the distribution of the legislative powers between the union government as well as the state government, and the extension of the executive power between the union as well as the state. These are the provisions which come under the special majority along with the consent of the state legislatures. That means in order to amend these provisions, the special majority is required, no doubt, but along with that, the ratification, the one half of the state legislature is required for that. Then only it can be amended. So in this way, the Indian Constitution is neither rigid, because what do you mean by rigid constitution? A rigid constitution is the one which requires a special procedure for its amendment. But there are various other provisions. It also can be required by the simple majority, and other provisions also can be required by the special majority along with the consent of the state legislature. So what do you mean by flexible constitution? A flexible constitution is the one which can be amended in the same manner as the ordinary laws are made. But Indian Constitution is not rigid nor flexible, but a synthesis of both. That's why I have written here, that is, the Indian Constitution is a blend of rigidity as well as the flexibility. And the next feature we have, that is the parliamentary form of the government. Well, let me give you a brief understanding about the parliamentary form of the government. The Indian Constitution has adopted a parliamentary system of the government not only in the center but also in the states. If we talk about the article, well, if we talk about the Article 73 as well as the 74, the Article 73 and the 74 deals with the parliamentary system of the government in the center. Similarly, the Article 164 and 165 deals with the parliamentary system of the government in the state. So let me give you a complete analysis of the parliamentary system of the government. Basically, you see, the modern democratic government has been classified into two categories on the basis of the nature of relations between the legislative as well as the executive organs of the government. So on the basis of the nature of relation between the legislature as well as the executive organ of the government, the democratic government has been classified into two types, that is the parliamentary system of the government as well as the presidential system of the government. So what do you mean by the parliamentary system of the government, and what do you mean by the presidential system of the government, and what is the difference between the parliamentary system as well as the presidential system, and why India has adopted a parliamentary system of the government? Everything we are going to discuss here. Let me tell you, what do you mean by this parliamentary system of the government? A parliamentary system of government is the one in which the executive is responsible to the legislature for its every policies and acts. On the other hand, the presidential system of the government, is the one in which the executive is not responsible to the legislature for its every policies as well as the acts. The parliamentary system of the government is it is adapted by many of the countries, including India. It is also there in the Britain, Japan, Canada, etc., and is prevalent. These are prevalent in most of these countries. Similarly, the presidential system of the government is also adapted by many of the countries like the USA, Brazil, Russia, etc., and it is very much prevalent in those countries. That means the parliamentary system of the government is prevalent in some countries, as well as the presidential system of the government is also prevalent in many other countries. Here you need to remember the parliamentary system of the government is also known as the Westminster model of the government, or it is also known as the responsible government,